So interestingly enough, if you do a search for the Shahada and look for the different translations, the first translation, there is no God but Allah, is by far the most prevalent. Okay, 40 times more prevalent. So it looks like some of the people that are answering here maybe need to go on the internet and start creating some articles with different translations. Sorry about the little technical problem here at the bottom there. But when we're talking about the names of Allah, there's a couple of ayat in Surah Al-Hashr, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Very beautiful, moving ayat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الله لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة, etc., etc. And it lists a whole series of the names of Allah. A very, very beautiful collection of ayat. But of course, the Quran is a complete remembrance of Allah. And you can not read more than one or two ayat of the Quran without being reminded of Allah in His various abilities and descriptions. When it comes to the names of Allah, we often connect them with this hadith, which is very well known to all of us, I'm sure, where Rasul ﷺ said, God has 99 names, 100 less one, which anyone who protects their sanctity will enter the garden. God is singular and loves what is singular. Now, the interesting thing about this hadith is that the 99 names that are mentioned in this hadith are the 99 names that we pick up through the Quran. Okay, and many people are quite motivated by this hadith because other translations of this hadith talk about the Allah having 99 names, and whoever memorizes them will enter the garden. So whoever memorizes them. But interestingly, the word in Arabic is يحفظ حفظ. So it's about in common usage of Arabic we translate as memorizing, but in the actual exact meaning it's protecting. And so you could say that really this is about protecting the sanctity, as in honoring those names, which obviously is much more profound than just knowing the name and being able to recite it. Because you could actually not even believe in God and just recite and memorize those names. So it's not about those games, but it's about actually having that kind of sanctity for those names in your heart. So it's a sanctity for those qualities, essentially. Now, it's very, it's in many ways a treasure trove that we have when it comes to the 99 names in Arabic, because these names can help tremendously in our ability to communicate who the Creator is to people. I've got a few quotes here of translations of and explanations of the 99 names by Imam al-Ghazali. Now, this is available in English, translated by Tim Winter. And it's an amazing book, and some of those descriptions are just so inspiring. So, for instance, Al-Karim is a beautiful explanation that Imam Ghazali gives for that. It says the generous is the one who forgives if he has the power, follows through when he promises, exceeds the limits one could hope for when he gives. And the interesting thing about Al-Karim is that sometimes it's translated as the generous one, but it's also translated as the noble one. And really what we're talking about is an intensification and a kind of limitless nobility. So, if you see this, you can see that this is the giving beyond what somebody would have expected to receive when they ask. And nor is he concerned how much he gives or to whom he gives. If a need is brought before someone else, he is unhappy. If he is treated badly, he reproves but does not pursue it. Whoever seeks refuge and support with him is not lost. This is a beautiful description. But day to day we do tend to find that people have quite confused understandings of God. So I remember I had a patient once who came to me and said, um, I don't believe in God anymore because God couldn't be this cruel if there was a God. Um, and essentially, she'd lost her mother recently, and she'd died quite abruptly, in quite an advanced age, 80s or whatever. And she was quite engrossed in the sorrow of losing her mother. But we got talking, and it became clear that she'd lost her mother-in-law not long ago through a slow and painful cancer. And so I asked her, well, if there was a God, um, wouldn't he have been kinder to your mother then? From your mother's point of view, isn't it kinder to go abruptly than to go suffering? And it's all about this understanding that we have. The nature of God is how he relates to you as a person rather than everybody else, and the bigger picture, and that if we don't understand that Allah is Al-Hakim, the most wise, and he thinks about what's there in the long term, and he thinks about how uh, everybody else is being affected as well when things occur, then of course you can have a very distorted understanding, and you can become bitter and very negative and even start denying God, which is not uncommon at all. Okay, and it's all because of that lack of complete understanding, which our 99 names, as have been explained to us, allow for. So, okay, what I want to do now, really for most of this presentation, is to go beyond the 99 Arabic names that have been revealed to us in the Quran. Okay, you might be saying, but there are just 99 names. Yeah, well, okay. I'd like to just ask you, just if you can type in that chat section there, um, how many names does Allah have? Okay, 99, 99, 99, over 99, infinite. Okay, right. Alhamdulillah. At least there's a split there. There's a split there. Okay. Over 99 can sound like a little bit more. Um, only God knows. Now I like that answer. I like that answer. Okay, let me show you a beautiful hadith, which is really inspiring. It makes me want to just kind of leave this presentation at this very moment and go off and read the Quran. And this is a hadith in which Rasul says, it's a dua essentially. Rasul says, I ask you by every name that is yours, by which you have named yourself, sent down in your book, taught any of your creation, or kept its knowledge exclusively in your presence, in the knowledge of the unseen, that you make the Quran the springtime of my heart, the light of my sight, healing of my heart, and the removal of my anxiety and sadness. SubhanAllah, what a beautiful dua. For the purposes of today's discussion, let us concentrate on the first half of that dua, where it says that I ask you by every name that is yours, by which you have named yourself, sent down in your book, that's the Quran, those are our 99 names, taught any of your creation, or kept its knowledge exclusively in your presence. Because what is a name after all? A name is a way of describing. Okay, so we can only describe Allah to the extent that we know Allah, and we are capable of understanding Him. And those are the names that have been given us, are the names that we're able to understand and relate to Allah with. But Allah is the creator of a vast universe, and Allah knows how many more universes. God only knows. He has potentials which are way beyond our imagination and understanding. And so there are many qualities, many descriptions of the Most High that are beyond our understanding. So how many names are there that He's kept with Him that are beyond the understanding of any of His creation? Countless, that are just known to Allah. Okay, and how about the names with which Allah has taught His creation to understand Him? Well, when did the revelation to mankind begin? Answers, please. in the beginning. Well, yes, I mean this is it. It became with Adam alayhi salam. Okay, it's years. Well, yeah, year whenever Adam alayhi salam came to Earth. That's when the description of the names to mankind began. So if you translate across all the languages, how many names are we talking about? Okay. Now let's do a little history of language for a short while. You see, if we understand that mankind has been on the earth for 50 to 100,000 years, okay, that's on the basis of archaeological evidence. We certainly know that it's going to be tens of thousands, okay. Over that time, language has, and we characterize man by his ability to speak, and you know, scientifically, but also in the Quran, this was a characteristic of Adam alayhi salam, that he knew the names, he was able to articulate them. So over these years, languages have grown, and as people have moved, they've taken their language with them into different parts of the earth, and of course, along with that, they've interacted with each other. So you know, another nation may come and it takes over one nation. It imposes a new language on them, or it gives them many extra words. So there's this constant dynamic of words and languages that's been taking place throughout history. Okay, are we sort of agreeable to that idea? So if we look at even the words in the Quran, they have, many of them are imported words. Okay, so we have examples here like Firdaus, Fir'aun. Obviously, Pharaoh is not an Arabic word; it was imported into the Arabic language, and then given a particular pronunciation and spelling in the Quran. Okay, and you can see on that slide there's many different words which are all mentioned in the paper. And so similarly, languages, words and languages have evolved, and Arabic wasn't kind of there, you know, whilst across the world all these different languages were interacting and changing, but Arabic was there from the outset and stayed unchanged right the way through history. We're not going to really believe that. So Arabic itself has evolved, and that's, you know, that's the current thinking. So there was this Afro-Asiatic family of languages, and then a branch came off that called the Proto-Semitic branch, which then split into the Western Semitic branch, of which we now have current day Hebrews and the other very similar languages of Syriac and Aramaic, which are very closely connected to Arabic. And then it went down to the Arabic Canaanite languages, the North Arabian languages, pre-classical Arabic, and then Arabic. So there's that journey that Arabic has taken in itself. So let's ask a question now, right? What is the language of the prophets and the language of Jibreel? Answer to that. Which language did they speak? We're getting a kind of even split here between people who are suggesting that the prophet spoke Arabic and people who are suggesting they spoke their own language. Yeah? Okay. Because, of course, all the prophets are quoted in Arabic with Arabic names, and they're quoted as speaking Arabic, are they not? Yeah. You know, they have conversations, they make du'as in Arabic as well, yes. Now, okay, similar question. What's the language of Jannah? Answers for that, please. Telepathy. Okay, very good. Don't know. Love, nice answer. Okay. Yes, basically, again, we've got sort of different opinions coming out there. Okay. Well, look at this hadith which has been attributed to Prophet ﷺ. The speech of heaven is Arabic, and the language in front of Allah, in front of God on the Day of Judgment is Arabic. Okay, there you have it. But the This is extracted from a paper by Yahya Ederer, and there's references for it. It's on sahihweb.com. But he quotes a number of scholars who have actually stated that this hadith is basically fabricated, is mawdu', a completely false hadith. And in fact, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam, does a very good summary on this whole discussion, and he says, all praises to the Lord of the universe. It is not known which language people will be spoken to on that day. It is because neither Allah nor His Messenger has informed of such a thing. The claim that the people of heaven speak Arabic and the people of hell speak Persian, which must have been something that was going around at the time, is not reliable, and we know of none of the companions who held such a view. May God be pleased with them. The debate started after the early generations of Muslims, when some scholars started to make such claims. All of these claims have no basis, either in text or logic, and God knows best. So there is no knowledge of what the language of paradise is, or about the language of the prophets. Well, we'll come to that, it'll be quite clear. And Jibreel obviously speaks, he might have a language of his own, Allahu Alam, I'm sure he does, but he's also multilingual because he speaks to prophets who spoke the language of their people, did they not? Now here are the verses relating to prophets. The idea that Islam is primordial, and we've mentioned this already, that it was there from the beginning of mankind, from all people, and that it's innate in our nature and has been from the outset. But the other ayah, Surah 14, verse 4, we merely sent messengers preaching in their people's native tongue, so that they may clarify to them the guidance. So that makes it very clear that the prophets of the past spoke their native tongue. Okay, were they bilingual? Did they know Arabic as well? Well, who knows? But I don't know when they would have learnt it. They just had normal lives. Right, we'll skip that part. So here's another example of this whole idea that the language that is used is a language that the people can understand. That's the bottom line. So you have this ayah, surely we have revealed it, the scripture, as an Arabic Quran, so that you, as in the Arabs, may understand it. Okay? So, as Sheikh Yahya Ederer explains, that based on this, these prophets were not called in their time by their people with their Arabized names. So there's this whole discussion about the names of the prophets, that in fact the names themselves are Arabized, that their names were the names of that were present in their own language in their people's times. So what we're saying now is that prophets spoke the language of their people, okay, and that think about this also, that if they spoke the language of their people, and mankind has always had names for Allah, they've always had names for God that they have used from the very outset. And in fact, believe it or not, those names have evolved with the languages as well. Yeah, and we'll come to that in a moment. So the prophets themselves had all sorts of different names for God. Yeah, and it was through these different names that they worshipped Allah. And some of them, well, I mean, all the prophets worshipped Him far purer than we could. You know, are we saying that because we know a dua in Arabic and we're able to utter it, you know, almost in a kind of rote manner, as a ritual, that in some way that makes that dua more powerful than when Isa alayhi salam, when Jesus was on his knees and praying and prostrating before God in the Garden of Gethsemane, and tears were flowing, and he was beseeching Him, okay, as explained and described in the Gospels. So can you really say that our prayer, just because it's in Arabic, is any better, even though he uttered it in in Aramaic, sorry? So you know, this is a really important point for us to understand, that there's no idea that the name has to necessarily become holy because it's in Arabic. There were holy names in all the languages of mankind, because holiness is about how you use that name, and that to use that name to create that reverence and that awe for the Lord of the universe. That's the important thing. It's the heart and its use of those words in whichever language. So yes, this idea of a plethora of sacred names. So yes, at what age did the prophets learn Arabic? They didn't learn it at birth. Was there a particular point at which they kind of, moved away and concentrated on learning Arabic, then came back? Allahu Alam, but doesn't seem very probable. So Dr. Umar Abdullah, in this amazing paper, which you have to read, goes through and describes how through history you can see that there are many amazingly moving and very natural descriptions of Allah that you can completely relate to. You see that description of God and you think, yes, this is the same God. We're talking about the same God, same creator. Yeah. So for instance, you've got Native Americans who have names such as the creator of the universe, ruler of the world, the guide, the good spirit, you to whom we pray, pure spirit, you to whom we belong, which reminds me of Rasulullah, by him in whose hands my soul belongs. So many names that we can completely relate to. And then we have, for instance, going through native or small, say, very simple cultures, and how they had these names as well. Creator of life, the Lord of all things, the eternal. But if you go through the article, you've got names in the old Hindu cultures, names for Allah in Chinese, and he's done an amazing amount of research to extract all of these names, which are entirely consistent with our understanding of the Lord of the world, Lord of the worlds. So let's look at the ones that are in the Bible as well, in the Hebrew Bible. So you have God of pre-existence, Elohi Qadam. So anyone know what name that might relate to in Arabic? Or attribute? No? Okay. Well, Al-Qadim is a description, which essentially means kind of ancient or pre-eternal or pre-existent. But it's not actually a name that's one of the 99. Okay, what about living one of eternity? Hay ha olam. Any Arabic translation for that would be quite similar. What's the Arabic for that? Because you might start to realize that the two languages are very similar. Al-Hay, absolutely. Al-Hay. Okay. And what about the God of eternity? Al-Olam. Actually, I don't know the answer to that one. Okay, next one. Holy One of Israel, Kadosh Ya Israel. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right, but how would that translate? Do we have a name of the 99 names that connects to? No. Okay. Yes. Well, I mean, if we forget the Israel part of it, okay. What about just the Kadosh? Al-Quddus, yes, thank you. Okay, what about Great King, Melech Rob? I think that doesn't even need anybody to think about. Okay, what about God All-Powerful, El Shaddai? Now, El Shaddai, I mean, that's not one of the 99 names, but it relates to the idea of Shadid, Shidda, okay, which is kind of intensity. Okay, what about God the Overwhelming, El Gabor? What's Al Gabor? Al Jabbar, absolutely. Okay. God Most High, El Elyon. What will that be? Yep, Al-Ala. That's it. Well done. Excellent. Okay. Now, there is this idea, which is quite prevalent, that there there's a difference. There's something special about using Allah instead of God, and that you should use Allah because it's a very special word for God, and it's different to all other descriptions. So I mean, this is just a lay poster who says, but you'll see lots of people with this kind of idea, that there is no other word in any language as pure as it could be, as it could possibly be. The word God has been messed up to an unimaginable degree. In different era by different people to different, it means absolutely different, not just the same. So much so that the word seems to have completely lost its essence, its very significance. On the other hand, Allah is unique as has ever been and shall remain to be. Most sacred of all words ever, held in the highest of esteem by mankind, and will continue to serve its very purpose forever to mankind. Does anyone have any response to that? You can just type in a quick one-word response, or one-line response if you want to. Let's see if you've got any suggestions. Okay, yeah, I think we're getting some very good answers here. God is more understandable to more people. That Allah's best name is probably only known to Him. Absolutely, yeah. And God, there's a small G and a big G, and they're very different. And that's absolutely true. Don't we know it? There's a big difference between big G God and small G God. Absolutely, entirely true. So, yeah, thank you. I mean, brilliant answers there, really. But this idea that God is undefiled. Well, of course not, because Allah is undefiled as a name, and that's not true, because Allah is a name that was used by the Arabs, the Quraysh, before Islam came, and He was the supreme God, but they say that He had 3 daughters. Do they not? Did they not? So you can't say that the kind of the pure monotheism of God was undefiled as such. And Christians used Allah, and they still do. And with that understanding, they incorporate the Trinity as well. So this notion that is somehow purer than other names is definitely flawed. Interesting enough, you can read all of this commentary, this section. The other people who really go on about how special Allah, the word Allah is, are the Qadianis, the Ahmadis. And they say that this was the unique and special name of God that was revealed particularly to Prophet Muhammad. And they use an argument that in prophecy before, in the Bible, it was mentioned that a prophet would come who would reveal the name of God. And before that, the true name of God was not known. So this is their argument. Okay, let's move on. Now, this is one of the most amazing parts of the article by Dr. Omar Farooq Abdullah, because he actually goes into the etymology, the origin of the word Allah. And he says, etymologically, Allah comes from the same root as the biblical words Elohim, Ha-Elohim, and Ha-Elo, all meaning God, invoked by the Hebrew prophets and the Aramaic and Syriac, Allah used by John the Baptist and Jesus. Elohim derives from Elo. Allah is an emphatic form of Allah, while Allah is connected to Ilah. So you can see how these words are already there in different forms as the language evolved. People took their Allah with them in different forms as their languages changed. So all 3 of these Semitic words for God, Elo, Allah, and Ilah, are etymologically equivalent. In origins, they're equivalent. The slight modifications between them reflect the different pronunciations, conforming to the historical pattern of morphological shifts in each tongue. They're akin to the variations we find, for example, between the Latin, Spanish, and Italian words for God, Deus, Dios, and Dio, or the English and German God and God. So you see how, even with the idea of God that's gone through different languages in Europe, it's had the same origin perhaps, and as the languages, people moved into different areas and their languages evolved, then that word itself evolved as well. Yeah. So the English word God, now we're going to God itself. Okay, so we've talked about Allah. and the origins, the etymology of the word Allah. Now moving to the English word God. He says the English word God, the Sheikh says, is a unique linguistic and theological treasure. And for me, this was absolutely dumbfounding. I'd never come across this explanation before. It is prehistoric, extending into the Neolithic period and deriving from the Proto-Indo-European root gyr, meaning to invoke or to supplicate. So Allah comes from the root meaning to worship, and this is from the root meaning to supplicate or to invoke, to call upon, essentially. God as a past participle construction, meaning the one who is invoked or the one who is called upon. And so the Shaykh summarizes that etymologically, God, the one who is invoked in prayer, is remarkably close to, in meaning, to the biblical Elohim and Allah and the Quranic Allah, which, as we have seen, convey the sense of the one who is to worship, to be the one who is worshipped. So it's absolutely amazing, really, that we've got two words here, one Arabic, one English, which have a very similar meaning, and their origin reaches back into prehistory, before even history was recorded, and that these words for God have just shifted in slight ways over time through the languages. So the name has traveled with people as they've traveled through time and through geography, and just taken different shapes. So this idea that you could somehow sort of say, oh well, this is Allah and that is God, is completely nonsensical. Sheikh Yahya Adres takes out a couple of definitions from Bibles and said, well, who is this? So the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition, he says, the supreme or ultimate reality, and this is the definition of God, the supreme or ultimate reality as the being perfect in power, wisdom, and goodness, who is worshipped as creator and ruler of the universe. And Sheikh Yahya asks, well, I ask you, who is this in Arabic? In Arabic, this is Allah. Okay, but in English, this is God. It's just a different language, that's all. Now, this is the really important point, okay? Because putting aside the names, in terms of the person, who is it that we worship and who is it that, say, Christians worship? The person, if we are talking about the person, and the Quran makes this very clear, and it's a commandment, in fact, a commandment. So Allah says, do not dispute with the people of the Bible, people of the book, in other words, but in the best manners, accepting those of them who commit oppression, and say to them, we believe in what was revealed to us and what was revealed to you. Our God and your God is one. Our God and your God is one, and we are a people in willing submission to Him. And this is the only point about us, is that we want to submit to His will. I'm just being told there's a technical thing I ought to be doing here. Just a moment, sorry. Okay. Right. I don't know if that's right. Okay. Right. I've been told that looks like my video wasn't on or something. Okay. Maybe this is better or worse. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Maybe not. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Right. Now another interesting thing, okay, is that the other people who are really emphatic about the difference between God and Allah are evangelical Christians. Okay, so we have a quote here where this author says, God is loving, approachable, and unconditionally forgiving. Allah loves only those who do what He says. He is unknowable, and if He ever forgives, it is only on strict conditions. And then he goes on to explain how, you know, Muslims trying to emphasize that the two are one is actually a kind of devious strategy to fool Christians into thinking that God is something else. So you know, there is this notion, and there's other people like, is it Pat Robertson, famous evangelicals, who talk about Allah being a moon god that was worshipped by Arabs prior to Rasul, and he just took that particular god and sort of appropriated the name. So you know, it's this. There's a kind of incentive there to create that difference. Right now, what is the understanding of the public about whether we worship the same God or not? Okay, because this is a commandment, remember. Allah has said, make it very clear to the people of the book that your God and our God is one. Okay, that's been made as a commandment. How successful are we? So now we've gone through history. Okay, we've talked about the whole idea of names, and now I want to take you to the present, the here and now, and our context, our society, our country, and to ask this question: well, how conscious is the public that we share the same God? Okay. So we've done this survey for a few years now. Well, we did it during IW, where we would ask people. There's a series of questions. One of those was, which of the following gods do Muslims? Which of the following do Muslims worship? And in brackets, there's more than one correct answer. Okay, so we're kind of encouraging people to think of possibly two answers. All right, so these are the options: God, Ganesh, Muhammad, Allah, and the great ancestors. All right, so, okay, what percentage do you think said Ganesh? 25%. Okay, all right, I'll stop you there. Very low. Okay, I don't know, it was probably 0 or something. Okay, what percentage do you think said God? 20%, 12%, 0%. It's being a bit pessimistic. 25%, 15, 40. Right. 80%. That's being rather optimistic. Okay, right. And what percentage said Allah? 90%, 99%. Okay. So we're getting the idea that a lot of people understand that Allah is the Muslim God. Yeah. Okay. What about Muhammad? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay, yeah. So generally we're thinking perhaps more people would say Muhammad than God. Okay. Well, only 14% said God. Allah was somewhere around 60 and Muhammad was somewhere around 40, if I remember rightly. But 14% said Muslims worship God. This survey was then carried out by an academic at Birmingham University with his social science students the following year. And out of them, only 6% thought that Muslims worship God. 6%. And these are children who've, well, young people who have been through the educational system quite recently, done GCSEs in RE, etc. Yep, and yet even then, only 6% said Muslims worship God. Yeah. Allah, 86%. What's the conclusion? What the conclusion is, the message is not getting out at all, is it? The message is not getting out. Okay. Okay. There's a couple of points about NLP, which is a kind of discipline aimed primarily at therapy, particularly psychological therapies, and they have some presuppositions, which are essentially assumptions that you have to go through to just make a start before you even start communicating with the client, before a therapist starts communicating with the client. There's different numbers, about 13 typically said. So a couple of these are very interesting and really worth noting, that when it comes to communication, remember that the map is not the territory. So in other words, you have a territory out there, okay, and then you devise a map of it. So you see something, and then your perception of that thing is the description you use for it. But it might not be the actual thing, it's just your perception, okay? And the other idea, which is a brilliant one, absolutely crucial, really crucial for anyone who wants to communicate, da'wah, etc., is that the meaning of communication is the response that you get. The meaning of communication is the response that you get. So basically, right, communication is not you just saying whatever you think. True communication is you receiving from the person an acknowledgement that he's understood what you meant. Do you get me? Yeah? So you have to then communicate in a way that the person really gets what's in your mind, and you see that feeding back, okay? Yeah. So this is absolutely critical in relation to our discussion that we're having right now, that we are somehow miscommunicating the idea that Allah and God are one. Any idea, people, why, how you think this might be happening? How are we so badly miscommunicating that understanding? Crucial understanding, one of the foremost commandments of da'wah is being ignored, or it's being failed. So why is that happening? Right, okay, somebody has said because we are insisting on using the Arabized word for God. Precisely. No, we understand it's the Arabized word for God. Well, what's the principle of communication? You need to be able to get back from people and understanding that they mean the same as well. So, for instance, in the media, do people, celebrities, prominent presenters, etc., do they understand that we're talking about the same being? If they did, then they wouldn't be saying Allah, they'd be saying God. Yeah, in the press, on the TV, etc., you would actually see people using God when they're translating Arabic things. Okay, whose fault is it that they're not? It's our fault, I think, because when we talk about the Creator in front of non-Muslims, we often continue to use the word Allah, and they will then perhaps understand that there's a difference between the two, and the Muslims prefer to talk about their God, Allah. Yeah, do you hear people sometimes saying, look, whoever you worship, whether it's God or Allah or whoever, what does that mean? That means that they get this notion that they're separate. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So Sheikh Umar Faraqullah, okay, summarizes this problem. He says, we have no one but ourselves to blame if, as the result of misplaced attachments to our sacred language. What's he talking about? Our misplaced attachments to Arabic. We love Arabic. Of course, it's the language of the Quran. Of course we do. We all try to learn Arabic. Okay, we try to understand the Quran in its native language. Of course. But does that then mean that we go uttering Arabic left, right, and center to a people who are completely alien to the language? So that's a misplaced love of the language, is it not? And through that, we have no one but ourselves to blame if we create the impression that we do not really worship the same God after all, or that we believe our Allah trumps our Allah trumps the biblical God. Yeah? See the point? Because that's what people think, that there's God and there's Allah, and Muslims think that Allah is the supreme God, and that's the one that you've got to worship if you want to be a Muslim. Yeah. So for instance, I remember once watching a beautiful program about the tsunami. It was quite, tragic. They were going through Thailand, interviewing people from there, interviewing people from Sri Lanka, and people were being asked, well, what's it how do you feel now? And they said, I just can't understand how a God could be that cruel. And that's how it's been translated. Then they went off to Banda Aceh, and there's this teenager that was walking all alone along the beach. And they asked him, what's his story? And he'd lost his entire family. And he said this really beautiful thing. He said, now listen to this, okay? Listen to this. I'm going to say it twice, but once properly translated. So, everyone belongs to God. We're given a short time to enjoy the company of our loved ones, and then when He chooses, God takes them back to Him. How does that sound compared to everyone belongs to Allah? We're given a short time to enjoy the company of our loved ones, and then when He chooses, Allah takes them back to Him. To my mind, they actually sound very different. They actually sound different. It's like, okay, you've got your Allah who just likes to take people randomly, but when you talk about it as God, it has a different feel, does it not? That they're different. Okay. Now think about this idea that a word has its immediate meaning that you can open up a dictionary and find a meaning for. Okay, but a word also has subtle shades of meaning. Okay. So you can take a word and you can write a whole paragraph about it, about the different ways that the word is used. And then the sort of feelings also that the word evokes inside you emotionally. Yeah. So some words give you a kind of calm feeling. Other words can make you start to feel a little bit irate. Yeah. So a word is much richer than just the one single translation. Okay, so you can say, look, I'm going to say Allah, but just understand that every time I say Allah, it's actually God. Okay, just think it's God. But every time you say Allah, it might have completely different connotations for that person. And mentally, they can't just make that translation. So, now, if we think about that, okay, let's ask that question then. Okay, I want you to write down what people think when the word Allah is mentioned. What kind of deity are they imagining? Generally, it's a generalization. Unfortunately, I apologize, but generally, those people, let's say that massive percentage who don't seem to understand they're the same. A god of violence, a foreign god, yeah, Eastern, and it's some kind of Eastern deity. What do they? A fearsome god, yeah, good, okay. And what do they think that God wants them to do? He's unforgiving. People have that kind of, because they see pictures of in the name of Allah and bombs and things like that, yeah. Angry as well, yes, absolutely. And what do people generally feel when you say God? Forgiving, yeah. I mean, that's right. There is that idea, isn't there? Warmth, caring. God is always looking out for me. God is good. He wants what's best for me. He's loving. There's always that strong emphasis in Christianity between God and love. Yeah, white guy with a beard. Okay, okay. Do you see the feeling? You say Allah to somebody, and the mentally something else is coming up in their mind to when you say God. Yes. So let's go back now, okay? And well, let's look at these quotes, okay? Let's say you're asking somebody, well, okay, you want to become a Muslim? It's very simple, all right? All you have to do is leave all your old beliefs behind and turn to Allah, and you will be saved. Do you see how it has it's almost saying turn, you might have believed in God. Well, turn away from that. Now turn to Allah instead. Okay? Now, let's go to these two propositions again. Okay, there is no God except Allah, and there is no deity except God. Okay, A, there is no God except Allah, there is no deity except God. You see, now look at these and see how they feel very different. When you say there is no God except Allah, what do you think what's the feeling that you're trying to suggest to somebody? You're trying to suggest to them that leave God, leave your understandings of God, and come and worship our Allah instead. Do you see? Yeah? Whereas there is no deity except God purely translates the true meaning of the Shahada. The true meaning. Now, just one idea to mention here is that some people have mentioned that a lot of people are atheists. Hang on a sec. What's an atheist conception of God? True, and we do have to recognize the fact that probably the majority of people aren't Christians, or certainly not religious Christians. And for a lot of people, even the word God is slightly alienated now. When you talk to a Christian, by all means, you can use God and we're talking the same language. When you speak to someone who's perhaps an agnostic, then for them, what do you think, what do they perhaps feel, many of them, when you say God? What kind of feelings do they get? And you sort of say, okay, well, I've done my best and the results are in God's hands, let's say, if you're preparing for an exam or something. How do agnostics generally feel about God, say? Childhood friend. See, what I'm saying is that for a lot of people, they will associate God with Christianity, and if people have got a discomfort with Christianity and a frustration with organized religion, then they might also feel uncomfortable with God. But people will say, I'm not sure I believe in God, but I do believe that there is a higher spirit out there, or there's a guiding force out there, or I believe that there's something there that cares for me or something. Do you see this idea that it doesn't, God isn't necessarily the best word for every person, and so perhaps we have to be creative in the language that we use to express Rabbul Alameen, the Lord of the worlds. Yeah. Nowadays, it just depends on the person, but you could be talking about the ultimate creator, the supreme being. These are words which people can perhaps understand and relate to in a much more neutral way, recognizing that people aren't Christians. Okay,